The sun rose gently over the mountain ridge, casting a warm amber glow across the sleepy Wyoming town of Laurel Ridge, a place so quiet, even the trees seemed to whisper instead of speak. In a modest farmhouse nestled at the edge of a pine grove, Charlotte Hayes, Charlie to everyone who knew her, stood on the wooden porch in her flannel robe, a steaming mug of coffee cupped between her hands. At her feet lay Beau, her 8-year-old golden retriever, his thick honey-colored fur catching the morning light like spun gold. He lifted his head only slightly, just enough to check on her, then closed his eyes again with a soft sigh. It was their morning ritual. Silence, coffee, breath, and one another. Charlie had gotten Beau as a pup not long after her mother passed. She'd just turned 20 then, too young to lose a mother, too old to believe a dog could ease that kind of ache. But when she first picked him out from a litter of 10, something about the way he leaned into her hand, without fear, without fuss, spoke to a part of her that no human voice could reach. They grew up together, in a way. Through her early teaching days at the one-room schoolhouse, through heartbreaks and quiet birthdays, Beau was there. He was the kind of dog who didn't bark much unless something truly mattered. The kind who waited at the window when she ran late, and who never needed to be told twice when it was time for a walk. Charlie's father, a retired forest ranger, used to say Beau was half dog, half soul. He'd laugh as the dog padded after Charlie into the barn, the grocery store, even church once or twice. And Beau didn't just follow, he watched. He seemed to read her moods like pages in a book. When she had a bad day, he'd rest his chin on her lap and stay until she was ready to speak. When she was happy, he'd bounce with her across the yard like a pup again. But more than his loyalty, it was his quiet understanding that made Beau feel less like a pet and more like a presence, something deeply rooted in her life, like an old oak or the mountain behind their home. He was there for the big moments, but also the small ones, folding laundry, writing lesson plans, watching storms roll in across the valley. As the wind rustled the pines that morning, Charlie reached down and ran her fingers through Beau's fur, thick and soft even in his older years. He opened one eye and thumped his tail against the porch. She smiled. "Big day today, huh?" she whispered. Beau didn't answer, of course he didn't. But he shifted, stood slowly, and nudged her hand with his nose, like he knew something was stirring in the air. And in a way, he did. What Charlie didn't know yet was that Beau, always quiet, always patient, was holding on to a secret of his own. The morning of Charlie Hayes' wedding broke clear and still, as if the world itself had paused to listen. The sky above Laurel Ridge stretched wide and pale blue, unbothered by clouds, while the early April air carried the scent of pine needles warming in the sun. Down in the valley, the old community church had already begun to stir, its windows flung open, and laughter rising from the gravel parking lot where neighbors parked side by side without worry of locks or time. But up on the hill, at the Hayes farmhouse, everything felt quieter. Not somber, just full. Inside the home, soft light spilled across the wooden floors. A lace gown hung in the window, its hem swaying ever so slightly in the breeze. Charlie stood before the mirror in her mother's old bedroom, smoothing the sleeve of her dress with careful hands. She looked radiant, though she wouldn't have said so, red hair pinned loosely, her freckles glowing against fair skin, and that expression she always wore when something mattered deeply, calm on the surface, full of leather underneath. Her best friend Molly sat cross-legged on the bed, fussing with a bouquet of wildflowers. "You nervous yet?" she asked with a teasing grin. Charlie smiled faintly. "Only about tripping down the aisle. Or crying too early. Or Beau eating the ring." As if summoned, a soft thud echoed from the hallway. Beau had been pacing outside the bedroom door all morning, paws tapping the floor, tail sweeping like a metronome. He hadn't eaten breakfast, which was unusual, and now he whined low and persistent, a sound that made Charlie pause mid-button. Molly raised an eyebrow. What's gotten into him? He usually sleeps through anything short of a thunderstorm. Charlie opened the door and Beau trotted in immediately, head low, ears twitching. He circled her once, then stood squarely in front of her, blocking her path. Not in play, not in protest. With purpose. Beau, she said gently, reaching to stroke his head. It's okay. I'm just getting married, not moving to Mars. He didn't budge. Charlie crouched down, brushing the folds of her gown aside, and looked into his eyes. They weren't frantic, but there was something in them. Alert. Focused. Like he was trying to tell her something in a language she'd forgotten how to hear. Her father called from downstairs. You girls ready? The carriage is almost here. Charlie stood slowly. Beau let out a small bark and nudged her leg, more insistent this time. Molly chuckled. He's going to steal the show if you're not careful. Charlie tried to laugh too, but her hand lingered on Beau's head longer than usual. The doorbell chimed, and outside, the townspeople were gathering, folding chairs squeaking against gravel, children chasing butterflies between rows of daffodils. It was a perfect day to begin a new life. And yet, something in Beau's behavior stayed with her. She didn't know it yet, but her wedding day wouldn't go exactly as planned. It would go deeper. The bells of St. Michael's Chapel rang clear across the valley, the kind of sound that settles into the bones and stays there. Rows of folding chairs dotted the grassy meadow beside the little church, where mountain wildflowers bloomed along the aisle and the breeze carried the sweet scent of lilac and sage. Guests had begun to hush, standing and turning with gentle anticipation as the organ inside began its steady notes. Charlie waited behind the chapel doors, her hand resting in the crook of her father's arm. Harold Hayes, now retired from his years as a forest ranger, stood tall in his pressed suit, though the stiff collar clearly annoyed him. Still, he wore the soft look of a father trying not to cry too early. You all right, kiddo? He asked, voice low. Charlie gave a tight smile. I think so. The moment felt suspended in amber. A stillness just before motion. From the pews came the murmurs of familiar voices, neighbors she'd known her whole life, students she'd once taught sitting with their parents. Ben stood at the altar, fidgeting slightly, nervous in the way men get when they're happier than they know how to handle. Then came the first chord of the bridal march. Charlie nodded, took her first step, and Beau bolted forward. He came from behind the chapel, galloping across the aisle with a sudden urgency that startled everyone. His thick golden coat caught the sunlight, but his bark was sharp, almost commanding. He didn't race to the crowd or to Ben. He ran directly to Charlie. A ripple of chuckles spread through the guests at first. Oh, that loyal dog, always so attached. But Beau didn't stop. He planted himself firmly in front of her, blocking the aisle completely, barking again, this time louder, insistent. Beau! Charlie whispered, mortified. What on earth are you doing? She reached down to take his collar, but he stepped backward, gaze fixed on her, tail rigid, ears drawn back, not fearful, but focused. It was the same posture she'd seen once when a rattlesnake had coiled near the barn. Alert. Protective. Harold frowned. Something's wrong. Molly, rushing over in her pastel dress and sensible boots, tried to coax Beau aside with a treat, but he wouldn't move. He looked only at Charlie, barking twice more, sharp and precise, like punctuation. Then, as if guided by something she couldn't explain, Charlie stopped. The music faded into the background. She knelt down, brushing her gown aside, and whispered, "Show me." Beau turned at once, trotting away from the aisle, across the grass toward the back of the chapel. No hesitation. Just a dog on a mission. Charlie hesitated only a moment. rising to follow. Gasps and puzzled glances followed her as she stepped off the aisle, lifting the hem of her dress with one hand, Beau's path with the other. And just like that, the procession stopped. The wedding paused. Not in panic, but in purpose. Something more important was waiting. And Beau, faithful, quiet Beau, was about to show her what. The sun had begun to tilt westward, casting longer shadows across the chapel lawn. Voices murmured behind her, confused, concerned, a little amused, but Charlie no longer heard them. Her lace hem swept over damp grass as she followed Beau, who moved with single-minded determination around the edge of the chapel and toward the back where the old barn stood quiet in the field. The barn had been there for generations, older than the church itself, with sun-bleached boards and rusted hinges that moaned in the wind. It wasn't used much anymore, maybe a spot for extra chairs during summer socials, or storage for hymn books and Harvest Festival banners. But to Beau, it seemed to matter. He stopped at the side door, scratched once, then looked back at Charlie. She opened it. Inside, the dust was thick in the air, curling in lazy spirals through the golden light. Old wooden pews were stacked in the corners, along with boxes of tablecloths, a few wooden crates, and a crooked stepladder leaning against the far wall. Beau padded inside and made his way to a small shelf near the back, nestled under a high, slanted rafter. He sniffed the ground, then stood still, his nose pointing upward. Charlie stepped forward cautiously, the air cooler in here, still scented with cedar and something faintly sweet, like dried lavender. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. She glanced up. Just above eye level, tucked into the corner of the beam, something caught her eye. A sliver of yellowed paper sticking out from a narrow gap in the wood. She reached up and gently pried it loose. It came out with a small cloud of dust and the creak of old secrets being disturbed. It was an envelope, worn and brittle at the edges, but unmistakably addressed in soft, elegant handwriting. "To Charlotte, on the day you say I do." Her breath caught. She recognized that handwriting. It was her mother's. She sat down on the nearest bench, hands trembling. Beau rested his head on her knee. The envelope was unsealed, yet clearly had never been opened. She unfolded the single page inside. Her mother's words spilled across the page in faded ink, full of love, full of the kind of truths only a mother saves for moments that matter most. It wasn't long, just a letter, but it reached across time like an embrace. In it, her mother described her own wedding day, the nerves, the doubts, the laughter, and the one thing she wished she'd known sooner, that love, real love, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's steady, quiet, like a dog who walks beside you even when you're not sure where you're going. And then came a line that made Charlie's hands go still. By the time you read this, I may not be there, but someone will. I arranged for him before I got too sick. His name is Beau. Charlie looked down. Beau gazed back up at her. She closed her eyes. And for the first time that day, she wept. Not from fear, but from grace. The barn was hushed except for the soft creaking of old wood and the quiet breath of the wind slipping through a crack in the rafters. Charlie sat motionless on the bench, her wedding dress pulled around her like snow. The letter trembled in her hands as she read the words again, this time slower, letting them land. By the time you read this, I may not be there, but someone will. I arranged for him before I got too sick. His name is Beau. Her mother had died 8 years ago. The illness had come fast, and Charlie, barely a young woman then, had been left with aching questions and a silence that never fully left the house. Beau had arrived just a few days after the funeral, a golden blur bounding from the back seat of a neighbor's pickup truck, carrying nothing but a soft chew always assumed he was a gift from a family friend, someone trying to ease the sharp edge of grief. But it had never occurred to her that he had been planned. That he was the last thing her mother had arranged, her final act of care, of foresight, of love. The letter continued. You've always had a soft heart, Charlie. That heart will be both your strength and your ache. There will be times when life asks more of you than you think you can give. When that happens, I want you to remember you were never meant to carry it all alone. Beau is not just a dog. He's a reminder of patience, of presence, of the kind of love that stays beside you, quiet and certain. Charlie's eyes blurred with tears. How many nights had Beau curled against her when she couldn't sleep? How many mornings had he nudged her hand when she sat staring out the window, lost in some silent sorrow? He had been her anchor, her shadow, her constant. Her mother's words closed softly. I hope, when the day comes that you wear a white dress and walk towards someone who loves you, Beau will be there. He will know if it's right, even if you have doubts. Dogs always do. Trust him. He knows you. He's known you longer than you think. Charlie looked at Beau now, his amber eyes still fixed on her as if he understood every word. Did you know all this time? She whispered. He leaned forward, nudging her hand gently with his nose, and let out a soft whine that felt less like confusion and more like memory. In that moment, something inside her shifted. The nerves, the jitters, the weight of the day, none of it vanished, but it all made a little more sense. Love wasn't just the promise she was about to make at the altar. It was this. A letter in a beam. A dog with a knowing heart. A mother's love, still unfolding. Charlie sat there a little longer in the barn stillness, the letter folded carefully in her lap, Beau's head resting against her knee. Time seemed to slow in that space, as if the moment itself asked to be honored, not rushed. Outside, the music had stopped, and the buzz of voices had grown quiet, curiosity melting into concern. She wiped her eyes gently, not wanting to smudge her mother's handwriting with tears. In her chest, something tender and warm took root, grief and comfort braided together. Her mother hadn't left her without a compass. She had left her Beau. And Beau, in his silent devotion, had waited for this very day to reveal it. The letter had said to trust him. So Charlie did. She stood slowly, brushing a layer of dust from her gown. Beau rose with her, tail wagging faintly, as though sensing the weight of the moment lifting. She gave him a look, half smile, half apology, and whispered, "You old soul. You knew exactly what I needed." She stepped out into the sunlight again, shielding her eyes. Guests were standing now, scattered in small pockets, some fanning themselves with programs, others craning their necks to look toward the barn. The priest stood on the church steps, one hand resting on the rail, his expression somewhere between puzzled and patient. Ben remained at the altar, shoulders square, but Charlie could see it in his stance. He was worried. About her. About what the interruption meant. About whether she'd be back. Charlie smoothed the skirt of her dress and began to walk, not hurried, but sure-footed. With Beau at her side, she crossed the grass, each step carrying a new kind of clarity. When she reached the crowd, they parted quietly. No one spoke. She approached Ben. He started to speak, but she raised a hand. "I just needed a moment." He nodded. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, this man who had never rushed her, never needed grand gestures, just presence and steadiness. "I am now," she said. And in her voice, there was no hesitation. Father Glenn stepped forward. "Shall we begin again?" Charlie turned to the guests. "If it's all right with you all," she said softly, "we'd like to start over." There was no applause, just something better, a wave of smiles, nods, a few teary eyes in the front row. The kind of silence filled not with discomfort, but with understanding. And so, the procession began anew. This time, Charlie didn't walk alone with her father. She walked with Beau. The crowd stood as the three of them came down the aisle, father on one side, golden retriever on the other. It wasn't traditional, but it was honest. It was right. Because sometimes, it takes a pause to remind you where the real vows are being made, not just at the altar, but in the quiet spaces where love has already taken root. As the laughter faded and the guests settled once more, Father Glenn gestured to the best man for the rings. But before he could step forward, Charlie's father cleared his throat. "Before we go on," Harold said, reaching into the inside pocket of his coat, "there's something I think needs to be part of this moment." He stepped beside Charlie, his weathered hands holding a small velvet box, faded at the corners, as if it had spent years tucked safely away. "I found this just last week," he said, his voice low but steady. "In your mother's cedar chest. I hadn't looked through it in years, but something told me I should." Charlie took the box with care, her breath catching in her throat. Inside lay a delicate ring, simple, antique, with a soft blue sapphire cradled between two tiny diamonds. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was beautiful in a way that felt lived in, like it carried stories of its own. "She wore it before she married me," Harold said, eyes shining. "Said it belonged to your grandmother. But she always hoped it might belong to you one day. On the right day." Charlie looked down at the ring, then up at Ben, and finally to Beau, still resting patiently by her feet. It was the right day. With quiet reverence, she handed the ring to Ben, who took it without a word, his thumb brushing over the cool stone. Sometimes love leaves its mark not in stone, but in the hands that pass it on. The sun had dipped just low enough to cast a warm, honeyed light over the old town hall where the reception was held. Strings of soft yellow bulbs crisscrossed the rafters, and the scent of baked apple pie drifted from the dessert table, mingling with laughter and the clinking of mason jar glasses. Ben stood with his hand on Charlie's lower back as friends and family gathered for toasts. There was no DJ, just a fiddle and guitar playing softly in the corner. Children ran barefoot outside in the grass, chasing fireflies. The kind of night that felt borrowed from another era. Charlie's father rose slowly, a glass in hand, and cleared his throat. "I've never been a man of long speeches," he began, to scattered chuckles. "But I will say this, a good man stands by his word, and a good dog, well, a good dog stands by your daughter when you can't." Eyes turned to Beau, who lay curled near Charlie's chair, his head resting on his paws. As if on cue, he perked up, stretched his legs, and let out a loud bark that echoed off the old wooden walls. The room broke into laughter, glasses raised high. Charlie leaned down, kissing Beau gently between his ears. "You've had a lot to say today," she whispered. Then she turned to Ben. "But I think he approves." And in that little hall, surrounded by old friends and worn floorboards, it felt like everyone, living and remembered, had found their place at the table. The celebration wound down slowly, like a song easing into its final note. Plates were cleared, the fiddle packed away, and the last few guests hugged their goodbyes beneath a sky turning soft with twilight. The kind of evening where time seemed to pause just long enough to be remembered. Charlie slipped out of the hall with her hand tucked in Ben's, her heels abandoned somewhere near the front porch. The earth felt cool and damp beneath her bare feet. Beau padded quietly behind them, his tail swaying gently as if in rhythm with the crickets now beginning their nightly chorus. They followed the old trail behind the church, the one Charlie had walked 1,000 times growing up, but never quite like this. The sun dipped low behind the mountain ridge, bathing the path in gold and shadow. Trees whispered above them, and in the hush between their footsteps, it felt like the world had given them a moment that belonged only to them. Charlie looked over at Ben. "I thought I was ready for today," she said softly. "Turns out, Beau knew before I did." Ben smiled. "Smartest one in the family." Ahead, Beau stopped and looked back, waiting. Charlie reached down and brushed her fingers through his fur. "Thank you," she whispered, not just for today, but for every quiet, steady moment he had given her across the years. And as they walked on, the three of them, their silhouettes fading into the soft embrace of dusk, it was clear. Some love stories begin with a vow. Others begin with a paw print. In the quiet corners of life, love often reveals itself in the simplest, most faithful forms. This story isn't just about a bride and a dog, or a letter found behind a barn beam. It's about the kind of love that stays. The kind that doesn't need words to be understood. The kind that walks beside us through grief, joy, uncertainty, and hope. Beau reminded us that sometimes, the truest companions in our lives are the ones who sit beside us without question, who wait patiently until we're ready to see what's always been there. We learn that love doesn't always come with fanfare or fireworks. Sometimes, it comes quietly, wrapped in golden fur, or tucked in the corners of an old barn, or written in the fading ink of a mother's hand. The lesson is this: real love shows up, and it stays. So, cherish the ones who've walked beside you, whether they have 2 legs or 4. Take the time to listen, to pause, to look beyond the moment and see the deeper story life might be trying to tell you. And when you feel lost, remember, you may already have the answer. Waiting patiently, watching quietly, just like Beau. If this story moved you, helped you remember something dear, or simply warmed your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We share stories that celebrate love, loyalty, and the beautiful bond between animals and humans. Hit the subscribe button and join us for more tales that remind us. Sometimes, the best parts of life are found in the most unexpected places. We'll be waiting for you right here with another story worth remembering.